Hello, everybody. How are we doing? How are we feeling? We are back. I can't actually believe it has been so long since we've done a live stream. It feels like forever. I was very, very excited to be back once again, getting things done, setting things up, and preparing for this weekend in Zandvoort. How we doing, Lofi? Sally's in the chat already as well. Cobby in there. Ethan, Ali, Dark One, Dia. Dean, Barry, Joseph, Rosa, how's it going? It's been a lot. Happy to be back. Streams are ready and raring to go indeed. Ali, they are. Hello, Eon, Goosebug in there as well. PTWR makes welcome back indeed. 10 races to go in the second half of the season. So much happened over the summer break. Apologies. First and foremost, I feel like I should apologize. There's been a little bit of a dip in content over the course of the summer break. That was mainly myself, obviously, needing a little bit of a summer break, but also a few things going on behind the scenes as well. So some big things coming over the next 10 Grand Prix weekends. And of course, all the weekends in between that we've got. But let's focus on Zandvoort. Let's focus on what we have seen over the course of the last few days. First and foremost, let's talk about this. Jack Doohan. I feel like I'm cursed, by the way. Every single time I do a video about the driver market or news that is kind of being talked about and ushered on, like whether or not it may or may not happen, every time I do a video like that, something comes out. I literally, on Tuesday, made the video about my predictions for the final 4 seats in Formula One, right? And I was like, when should I put that out? Could put it out Wednesday, could put it out Thursday. But I was like, no. Let's get the weekend off to a bang, right? I'll put it out Friday. Then we've got the stream on Saturday, stream on Sunday. We've got a bit of a momentum going on. We've got a bit of a rolling start to the restart after the summer break. Then, literally, hours before the video is scheduled to go out, Jack Doohan signs for Alpine. So I have to completely rip that bit of the video up, try and edit it a little bit so that it wasn't ridiculously long. So I went through some other options for Alpine that were therefore pointless because he had been signed to the team. It was just an absolute nightmare. Don't know how I managed to do it. Every single time I do a driver transfer video, someone gets confirmed, which means that basically what I should do is do one every week. And then we'll get all of the drivers confirmed for 2025 pretty swiftly. Because it's just ridiculous. Zach is weird. Hello. Oh, loads of people coming into the chat. How we doing? Hello from the Philippines. Philippines mentioned, says Kim. Qualifying, getting ready. Great t-shirt. Thank you very much. Appreciated it. Yeah, how do we feel about Jack Doohan going to Alpine? I sort of expressed in that video, it felt like it was the obvious choice. Maybe not the first choice. I feel like they might have wanted to keep hold of Esteban Ocon, whether or not that would have worked. It was starting to sort of tail off, wasn't it? Like at the beginning of the season, I predicted that Esteban Ocon would stay. But as the season progressed, it did feel like it was getting more and more tense between the two of them. And Esteban Ocon having that opportunity to move over to Haas is pretty good for him. So understood that from that aspect. Then it was like, who goes in there? They came in very late into the conversation for Carlos Sainz, but Carlos Sainz had already talked to a lot of teams, a lot more, I'd imagine, than Alpine. Plus, Alpine had a little bit more sort of 50-50-ness about it. I suppose with Williams, when it comes to Carlos Sainz, at least he knew what he was getting. Whereas with Alpine, they were changing their team boss, they were changing their engine supplier, they were changing almost everything. So it was very difficult to know where they would really be going. Jack Doohan, been in and around the team for a very long time. Arguably could have had that seat before they managed to get Pierre Gasly into the Alpine setup. And yeah, I think deserves that seat overall, does Jack Doohan. And I can understand exactly why they would have wanted to get him into that seat and get him in alongside Gasly with a year before 2026. Because now he has a year, can go into it a little bit, see what it's like at Alpine. Alpine can judge whether or not he's good enough to stick around for 2026, and they can kind of go from there. Predictions for qualifying, we'll get there, don't you worry. But that does leave us with a 2025 driver lineup that looks like this. Obviously, Jack Doohan going into that Alpine seat, the most recent change on there. Then you'll notice that I've put Kimi Antonelli on there already. And there's a reason that I've kind of put Kimi Antonelli... Oh, I've changed the... Why have I done that? How have I done that? You notice that I've put Kimi Antonelli on there already. Now, he hasn't been fully confirmed, but if you haven't been kind of watching all the behind the scenes and all the interviews from this weekend, Toto Wolff made a little slip up, a tiny slip up. He was talking about the next season. He was talking about the driver lineup for next year. And he effectively said, you know, no, he was asked about Max Verstappen, sorry. So there's obviously been the talk around Max Verstappen going in to that Mercedes seat, possibly for 2025, possibly for 2026. And Toto Wolff was asked about it once again. He confirmed that Max Verstappen definitely would not be in there for 2025. But then he was asked about 2026. And he said, well, I don't really want to focus on 2026 yet because I want to give George Russell and Kimi Antonelli the best opportunity for 2025. So he kind of let slip that Kimi Antonelli is very likely to be in that seat. I think it's one of those things that we all knew anyway. And he is going to be taking a free practice 1 session in Monza next weekend. So his home Grand Prix in Italy. He's just turned 18. It makes sense that Kimi Antonelli will probably be confirmed next weekend. So that then leaves us with an RB seat and a Sauber seat. I think the Sauber seat has become a little bit easier to fill, in my opinion. Like, it does feel like Valtteri Bottas is going to be the man that goes in there for me. And that's because they're running out of options, really. Their first choice was clearly Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz now in that Williams seat, so they can't get a hold of him. Their second choice felt like it was Esteban Ocon. Ocon also confirmed for Haas. So they're finally getting down to like their third, fourth, fifth choice. Their third choice, seemingly, whilst they were under Andreas Seidel, was actually Liam Lawson. So Liam Lawson was linked to this seat quite heavily last year. And also, I thought it was quite interesting that Christian Horner said that Liam Lawson will be in a Formula One seat rather than a Red Bull seat as such. So I think Liam Lawson was kind of the third choice for that Kick Sauber seat alongside Hulkenberg. But now they've had a change of leadership. Obviously, Andreas Seidel moved to one side. Binotto has come in. And Binotto has talked a lot about wanting experience in that car. Trying to get Audi off to a really solid start and getting experience in there straight off the bat. So I think Valtteri Bottas is probably going to end up in there. And I think it's a bit weird because I think he's probably their fourth choice. I think Sainz was number 1, Ocon number 2, Lawson number 3, Valtteri Bottas number 4th choice. And considering Valtteri Bottas is one of the most experienced drivers on the grid, a 10-time race winner, has experience at winning Constructors' Championships over and over and over again, has worked with Mercedes, has now got experience within the team. Like, it's not like they're bringing in a new driver and there's a bit of 50-50 as to whether he'll settle. He's already there. And yet he seems to still be overlooked by the Audi Stake Sauber setup. So it seems really strange, but I do think Valtteri Bottas is going to end up being that man in there, which then leaves us with that RB seat. And this becomes really tricky because Christian Horner said Liam Lawson is going to be in a Formula One seat, which then made me think he was going to end up at Kick Sauber. Now, his name has completely gone from my head. Now, the Red Bull bloke, Dr. Helmut Marko has come out and said that Lawson will be in a Red Bull seat. So it does feel like Liam Lawson first of all, hasn't got anywhere else to go, but should end up in that second seat alongside Yuki Tsunoda. Unless Yuki Tsunoda out of nowhere is axed. Like, that could definitely happen. It's Red Bull. They do crazy things like that all the time. But I do think that's what we're going to end up with. I do think Liam Lawson is going to end up in there. Daniel Ricciardo is the other question. Obviously, Sergio Perez, big question mark still around him for the rest of the season, whether or not he's going to be in there for next year. I know they confirmed him earlier on in the year, and then again at the beginning of the summer break. There is a lot of pressure around Sergio Perez, and I still feel like there is scope for Sergio Perez to be replaced by the team if they see fit. You know, I feel like there's opportunities, and Red Bull will have to do the best thing for them out on track. And especially because everyone is closing in on them right now, it makes sense that they might want to actually change around a little bit and sort of see what other options are out there. Maybe Daniel Ricciardo goes into that seat. But this is what I've got. I've got Antonelli in the Mercedes seat. Doohan now confirmed at Alpine. Valtteri Bottas going to kick Sauber. And Liam Lawson going into an RB seat of some kind. Let's get your thoughts on it in the comments. What have we got? McLaren 1-2. I mean, I'd absolutely hope it. I believe. Perez out. Yuki to Red Bull. I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I just feel like Daniel Ricciardo is the one there. Sargent will get the Mercedes seat. I've talked to him at a race. Unlikely. I think Logan Sargent probably going to end up maybe in an IndyCar slot or something along those lines if it was him. But yeah, I feel like that's how the 2025 driver lineups are going to end up. But I'd love to know your thoughts. On the note of Logan Sargent, shall we move on to Williams? I think Williams need to be talked about just quickly before we get into the nitty-gritty of the weekend, because, well, it's been an up and down weekend for Williams, hasn't it? I mean, they've got a bit of a weird back and forth kind of going on at this moment in time. They brought their first big upgrade, positive. They then smashed it to bits, negative. It's very Williams, isn't it? You know, they started the season like this. They had the first 4 or 5 races where they had some huge crashes. You remember back to Australia where they didn't have the spare chassis, so Logan Sargent couldn't race. I think we're going to see something fairly similar this weekend where Logan Sargent doesn't take part in qualifying. A huge crash in free practice 3 and huge damage done to all of those new bits that they were putting onto the Williams car. You know, we talk about Logan Sargent wanting upgrades. He finally got them, and then he's destroyed them to bits. Looking at those upgrades, though, a very revitalized Williams for the second half of the season. They're the team that has brought the biggest upgrades. They've actually done huge work to the top end of the car, apparently reducing the weight of that top end, where you can kind of see that Duracell battery. That's been completely reworked, which is not something we really see from a lot of Formula One teams during the season. That is normally left for a winter break kind of rebuild. But actually, they've got so much weight and they want to get the center of gravity of that Williams car lower. So they have reworked that top end of the car. You'll also see the side pods taking on that kind of Aston Martin style shape. I feel like Aston Martin were the team that really did this first, that kind of swooping down into the gullies like we've seen. And now we've seen actually quite a lot of teams build up for that. And a lot of teams decide to go in that direction. Williams also joining the crowd there a little bit and going for that new direction for themselves. Then you look at like the top end of the car. Again, you kind of look at this side pod shape, completely redone. The big gully underneath the side pod to try and direct that airflow down. Apparently also quite a bit of work done to this front end suspension, again, to kind of point the air in the right direction when it comes to moving it through that gully towards the rear end of the car, trying to get as much downforce as possible. You can also see here a lot of work done to the side of the floor, which makes me feel like the underside of the car, something that we don't really get to see and something that is vital, so important to Formula One, the underside of that car is going to be completely reworked for this part of the season as well. But the main thing that we can kind of see from the front end is the side pods that we look at front on. You can kind of see the old shape versus new. This kind of wide open, and it had a big lip at the bottom here as well. The old style side pod on the Williams, completely revamped, completely different shape. Also, the lip is kind of at the top now. The underside being is kind of top lip heavy rather than bottom lip heavy as it was before, and a completely reworked side pod for the car. So huge upgrades brought to the Williams car, which then end up being absolutely destroyed by Logan Sargent. I think that's a massive negative for the team kind of moving into this weekend, because they just needed something to go in their way, right? Like, we've been talking about Williams so much this year, and the fact that they haven't been able to bring upgrades, they haven't been able to do what they've wanted to do because of the crashes that they had in the first 5 races. Now, they get back after the summer break, brand new car, and again, it's smashed into pieces within the first Grand Prix weekend from Logan Sargent. Finally, before we delve into like this weekend specifics, I did also want to touch upon this video that I made here about the in-season development compared to Red Bull. In case you missed it, it was towards the beginning of the summer break. But a quick recap of it, just looking at which teams are making the most progress, which teams are catching Red Bull, and which teams are falling away slightly. As expected, McLaren are the top team right now. In fact, obviously, they are just behind Red Bull in terms of average pace over the first 14 races. If you look at the last sort of 5, 6 in specifics, McLaren are right there with Red Bull. I think we are looking at now, with 10 races to go, a proper battle in the Constructors' Championship, especially if Sergio Perez can't re-find any of that form that he had beforehand. Alpine, second best or second most improved team on the grid, does not mean that they are now the third fastest by any stretch of the imagination, but they had a lot to do at the beginning of the season, so it makes sense that they'd kind of gained quite a lot because their car was so heavy in comparison to what they wanted it to be. But this one is the interesting one. Mercedes, they've continued to bring tiny little upgrades. They're continuing to tinker, and therefore they are slowly gaining. Obviously, winning 3 of the last 4 races before the summer break. Should have been a 1-2 in Belgium outside of the disqualification for George Russell. Mercedes looking really, really interesting. I think actually the one thing that is stopping McLaren from being out and out competitors with Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship is actually Mercedes, because Mercedes are now starting to take points off of not only Red Bull, but off of McLaren as well. And McLaren therefore are missing out on those points, missing out on those places, which could have caught them up to Red Bull a lot more. You know, instead of Mercedes winning 3 out of the last 4, if it was actually McLaren winning 4 out of the last 4, they would be so much closer to Red Bull with 10 races to go. So it'd be interesting to see how Mercedes continue that. I think Haas have to be talked about. Haas have done so well this season to keep up with the rest of the grid. This is not an area we normally see Haas. Haas usually start the season well and then drop off dramatically throughout the season. Actually, they've been able to hold on to the rest of the pack this year, and I think Haas have done really, really well to do so. They are having a little bit of struggles this weekend. If I just hide this one. You might have seen Nico Hulkenberg has had 2 incidents in 2 days, unfortunately for him. They seem to have like a braking issue of some kind. It's sort of a weird unknown at this moment in time what's really going on there, but they seem to not quite, especially on Nico Hulkenberg's cars, have the brakes set up in the right way. Big crash yesterday, and then also took his front wing. So it was yesterday in free practice 1, he crashed at Tarzan, caused a red flag, and then today, this morning as well, also crashed once again, destroying the front wing of his Haas car. So be interesting to see how Haas have done over the summer break, because again, they've done so well, I think, to kind of keep pace and keep up with the rest of the pack throughout the year so far. They've done so well to maintain that position as the best midfield team. Now it's starting to, you know, really come under pressure. Like, the final 10 races is where crunch time is, right? It's your final opportunity throughout the season to really prove where you are and prove that you can keep up in terms of development with the rest of the pack. Though it's interesting that RB kind of dropped off a little bit in comparison to Red Bull. To be expected. Like, you see this kind of pack of Haas, Sauber, Williams. They're all kind of where I would expect them to be. Williams maybe a little bit lower, just because, as I said before, a lot of the upgrades that they wanted towards the beginning of the season had to be delayed because of those crashes. So the Williams team maybe a little bit lower than I would want them to be. I think that the big ones, the big talking points, Ferrari, Aston Martin, both of which have really struggled. Like, Imola was the one I know that they won Monaco afterwards, but Imola, the upgrades that Ferrari brought, the fact they just didn't work whatsoever for Ferrari, and their points per race completely dropped off a cliff after that Monaco win from Charles Leclerc. And then Aston Martin, they've bounced back a little bit of Aston Martin. In fact, I think I have got Aston Martin's finishing positions. Where are we? Aston Martin's finishing positions. Like, you look at it, and the fact that, well, where am I? You look at it, and the fact that actually, when you look at where they are and where they should be, they've kind of bounced up and down throughout the season. You look at the fact that actually Fernando Alonso has done some pretty solid work for the Aston Martin team. You look at the first few races up to Imola, as I was saying before, for Aston Martin. They're kind of thereabouts, your ninths, your fifths. Really solid finish from Fernando Alonso in there. It felt like the season had started really solidly. 6th place for Lance Stroll there as well. 6th place for Fernando Alonso. Like, they were properly inside of that top 8, which I think is really impressive for them. But it's sort of post Imola. Actually, Canada was a little bit of an outlier, but they always do run really well in Canada. It was kind of this section of the season here, wasn't it? It was Imola, Monaco, Spain, Austria, where Fernando Alonso just seemed completely lost inside of that car. You don't really see Fernando Alonso finish in 19th and 18th place a lot of the time, do you? He is one of the best Formula One drivers we have ever seen, and he was so out of sorts. And I think the fact he was so out of sorts kind of highlighted by the fact that Lance Stroll was being in fairly comfortably. Again, not something that we've seen inside of the Aston Martin team very often, but they do seem to have bounced back. Big upgrade came in Silverstone and actually has helped them out quite a lot. They're back into those kind of point scoring places, hovering around 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th place a lot of the time. And they'll be hoping that that will be the kind of area that they are finishing in the second half of the season, rather than these 12th, 13th, 14th places. I know it doesn't feel like a lot in terms of dropping back from 10th to 12th or 10th to 13th. But actually, if you look at how close and how competitive all the Formula One cars are this season, that drop off of just 3 places actually tells a really big story. It means the likes of Haas were running a lot quicker, RB were running a lot quicker, Williams were causing Aston Martin problems. And again, that just shouldn't really be the case considering where Aston Martin started the season, but they have dropped off on average a lot, but actually they've kind of saved it in that last part of the season, as I was saying. Was there anything else I wanted to quickly talk about? Who else have we got? We've got Sauber, not really that interesting, is it? Williams, Alpine, RB. I mean, we could look at the Red Bull situation. Bring that up. Come on. Also, if you haven't noticed, this is a brand new thing for the second half of the season. So if I'm learning how to use it, just allow me for a moment. This is the Red Bull positions. And actually, I did just want to kind of point out, I've heard a few people talking about over the summer break whether or not we're likely to see a championship battle. Can Verstappen be put under pressure? No. It's the real thing. I think the thing here is Max Verstappen, okay, we say that he's kind of dipped off, right? I've heard a lot of people saying, well, Max Verstappen hasn't won in the last 4 Grand Prix. Yeah, but look at the kind of 10 before that. He's won 7 out of 10. And okay, yeah, you'd expect him to be in and amongst it. In Great Britain, 2nd place. In Austria, he was leading the Grand Prix, let's not forget. He then had that clash with Lando Norris. In Hungary, it kind of all went wrong that weekend. And in Belgium, he took a penalty. He would have won that Grand Prix if he hadn't have taken that penalty. It's not all doom and gloom for Max Verstappen right now. Max Verstappen is still clearly the championship favourite by a long, long way. Not just because he is leading the championship by a considerable margin, but actually some of those results in the last sort of 4 races that people are talking about, I feel like, well, there's 3 outliers, right? Austria, where he had a collision, Belgium, where he should have finished higher, and then Great Britain, where it was chaos, right? Anything could have happened, the rain, etc., etc. And he still finished in the top 5 in all of those races. He still finished incredibly well in all of those races as Max Verstappen. So it is not all doom and gloom for Verstappen. If you are worried as a Verstappen fan that he is now under pressure for the championship, just rest assured he is absolutely fine. The other side of things at Red Bull is Sergio Perez. And talking of Sergio Perez and how he's kind of doing, it's that drop off, isn't it? You can just see clearly after Miami, second, fifth, second, third, fourth, 4 podiums in the first 6 races. Perfect. This is exactly what you want from Sergio Perez. Big tick. Give him a contract. He's doing everything that we need him to. Then comes this part of the season, right? You can see hasn't even got within touching distance of Max Verstappen. In fact, every race that Verstappen has finished is finished above Perez, which you'd kind of expect. But outside of that, it's just really not good enough from Sergio Perez, in my opinion. In fact, I'm going to choose a different color so you can see it a little bit better against it. In these races here, he's finished 8th place, right? Because Austria, again, Lando Norris DNF. Belgium, disqualification for George Russell. So he's finished in 8th place in all of those. And if you think the real battle is with those top 4 teams, as I just discussed, Aston Martin have really fallen off in comparison to the rest. There's only 8 drivers he's battling with. So this is effectively last. Okay, so he finishes 8th place. That's effectively last of where he should finish, given where that car is. So he's in last place. Then outside of that, 2 DNFs and a 17th. I feel like the DNF in Canada, definitely his fault. Great Britain, he was used as a little bit of a guinea pig. But again, that was because of the crashes over the course of the weekend. Again, it was because of the mistakes. And then Monaco, I've heard people say, well, he was taken out by Kevin Magnussen, wasn't really his fault. He shouldn't have qualified that far down to be in consideration with even touching Kevin Magnussen. So for me, I just feel like Sergio Perez has been at fault for all 3 of those. And then in the races where it's gone okay, he's finished last of where he should actually finish. So I am not sold on the Sergio Perez hype. I know a lot of people defend him, but it's not for me. Anyhow, shall we get into actual qualifying itself? I've just rambled on for a good 30 minutes. We've sorted out. There's still a few more things I did want to discuss, but we can save that for the race stream tomorrow. We are getting set up in the grid. Let me just quickly get logged in. And everything can get underway. What are we feeling in terms of predictions for this weekend, actually? Because I think when it comes to this weekend, I want to say Max Verstappen will win it quite comfortably. But it doesn't feel like it's gone that way, does it, in the last few Grand Prix weekends? It feels like I should say something else. It's not 2023 and Max Verstappen is just the outright winner every single time. But I do feel like when it comes to Max Verstappen this year, he's kind of shown up in those races you expect him to show up in. You know what I mean? Like those circuits that he does generally do really well in, he has kind of stepped up a bit. I'm thinking like Austria qualifying, he was absolutely stunning. Again, Belgium qualifying, he was really, really quick. And those are the kind of races that I think of as Max Verstappen tracks. And obviously, Zandvoort is home Grand Prix. It's old school. It does feel like a Max Verstappen track. And therefore, I do think he's just going to be going all out once again. No offense, but some people think making me watch them play a video game is the same thing. Same thing as what? As in, you get scammed by the old watching qualifying, but actually it's just them qualifying on the game. It's a classic, absolute classic. Ooh, oh, interesting. Track map in all the wrong place. Let's get set up, shall we? We're gonna have cars out on track fairly swiftly. Why is my live timings not working? Oh, we've got a car on track. Hello, Nico Hulkenberg. Welcome to the chat. I don't know why the timings is wrong. Let me quickly sort this out. Oscar pole position. Oscar's not a bad shout for pole position here, I think. I think this track will quite suit Oscar Piastri, just generally speaking. I do think it's going to be tough though. I just can't see beyond Max Verstappen, unfortunately. Which I know is really boring and is definitely not what people want to see or hear or know about. But it does just feel like Max Verstappen is so quick here in comparison to the rest of the field. Interesting that not a lot of people are going for Lando Norris. Though. Oh no, Dark Deer won. Dark one Deer. Lando Norris P1. Lando qualifying P1. They bottle the start. Yeah, that's happened. That happens. It's frustrating, isn't it? As a McLaren fan, I've seen it a lot from Lando, unfortunately, over the last few races. Let's do that. There we go. We're set up. We're ready. Phew. Just as we're about to see some fast laps as well. Some would say perfectly timed from myself. Others would say should have really sorted it out earlier. Nico Hulkenberg comes across the line at 113 dead from Nico Hulkenberg. Sets the standard in his Haas car. Haas car that, as we mentioned before, he hasn't been incredibly happy with so far this weekend. Carlos Sainz now confirmed to be a Williams driver for next season. What can he do in his final 10 races at Ferrari? I think he'll want to be, again, sort of stamping his authority, trying to outscore Charles Leclerc if possible in the last 10 races, showing Ferrari what they will be missing. He's going to start his flying lap now. Zhou Guanyu came across the line at 113.7. Valtteri Bottas, the first man to get into the 112s, a 112.8 for the Finn. On board with Carlos Sainz. Pierre Gasly, a 112.2. Starting to edge towards those 111s. Esteban Ocon just behind his teammate with a 112.5. Interesting to see how the Alpines go here this weekend as well. Obviously, a lot of talk about Alpine under Oliver Oakes now. How that will reframe what they look like for not only 2025, but 2026. Lance Stroll, the first man to get into the 111s. Oh no, sorry, Alex Albon there as well. Both 111.8. Lance Stroll slightly quicker though. Kevin Magnussen, a 112 dead. Can't quite get into that 111 slot. Fernando Alonso, also a 112.0, goes fourth fastest. Let's see Carlos Sainz. Oh, it's only 7th fastest for the Ferrari. 112.7. Sergio Perez, though, 111.9 from the Mexican. Under pressure for the second half of the season. Once again being discussed considerably over the course of this weekend. Charles Leclerc now coming around the final corner. What can the Monegasque do? He goes third fastest, a 111.8, but still off the pace of Lance Stroll and Alex Albon leading the way right now. Oscar Piastri, though, goes top of the tree, a 111.5. Puts himself 0.3 ahead of Lance Stroll's time. Of course, we are in Q1 just looking for those bottom 5 drivers. Obviously, well, bottom 4, Logan Sargent, unlikely to be taking part. In fact, I don't think taking part at all. I know Norris around that banked corner. And though Norris pretty swift first sector. Not the quickest of anybody, but a little bit quicker than his teammate, actually, through that first sector, Lando Norris. George Russell comes across the line, only 8th fastest for the Mercedes driver. Obviously, the disqualified winner of the Belgian Grand Prix. And there is the confirmed winner of the Belgian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton, going top of the timing sheets, a 1:11.3 from Lewis Hamilton. Lando Norris, though, looking very swift indeed, and it's a really quick lap from Lando Norris. If he gets this final sector clicked into gear, can he come across the line quicker than Hamilton? Oh, not quite. 0.002 of a second between Hamilton and Norris. It was looking swift and so incredibly close. Goes fastest through that final sector, does Lando Norris. Oh, but lost a little bit of time. Just understeered wide, lost the rear end of the car. Little bit of a drift from Lando Norris was the reason that he didn't quite get there. Max Verstappen now joins us out on track as well. The only driver yet to set a time. So it is Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, and Carlos Sainz, the 3 drivers that need to improve. Max Verstappen, the driver that is yet to set a lap time. You'd imagine that will put Daniel Ricciardo down into that bottom 5 and out of qualifying unless he can improve in the final 10 minutes of Q1. Alex Albon started a flying lap. We're on board with him at this moment in time. Oh, I need to change where the alerts sit, don't I? Whilst we're a little bit of a stop, I will thank everybody for almost 100,000 subscribers. Considering I took a little bit of a break over the summer, I was expecting it to peter off a considerable margin. But you guys have absolutely flown through the subscriber count. 100,000 is on the way, considering at the start of the season, I think I set our goal at 30,000 subscribers. I was like, if we can get 30,000 subscribers by the end of the season, I'll be a very, very happy man. The fact that we're now within touching distance of 100,000 is absolutely ridiculous to me. Thank you so much for all of your support. And if you want to help out the channel even more, I've now started a little bit of a goal for you guys. As you can see underneath me, I would like to try and get to 50 members on the channel for these live streams. At 50 members, I'm going to be releasing a lot of particular members content and upping that a little bit. Basically, because I still work full time, I can't justify, unfortunately, taking a day off of my, work to do that. What I'm hoping is if I can get up to about 50 members, I'll be able to shift around my work a little bit, maybe take one day off a week of my actual job to focus on this content and therefore be able to make members specific content for the channel, as well as more content in general, because I'll have, an actual work day dedicated to it rather than me having to do it in the evenings, which is a lot of the videos that you see me make, they're being recorded at like 11 p.m. at night. So that's the goal, the kind of thought process. If we can get to 100,000 subscribers and 50 members, I can slightly change around and hopefully bring you even more stuff, which again is absolutely mental to me that we're even close to this and close to the opportunity of being able to do that with this channel. I have to thank you so much. Getting back to it though, Lewis Hamilton has come into the pits. Lando Norris also in the pits. Max Verstappen came across the start-finish line. He was 100th, or nearly 200ths off Lewis Hamilton's time. He went 3rd fastest and did indeed put Daniel Ricciardo in that bottom 5. And Carlos Sainz has just put Esteban Ocon down there as well. Although Carlos Sainz only 12th fastest in that Ferrari. So hopefully an improvement to come from him. Otherwise, he's going to be under a lot of pressure, especially as Pierre Gasly now goes 5th fastest. dropping him down. Zhou Guanyu stays slowest of the cars out on track. Yuki Tsunoda shuffles himself up a place, up into 14th, but then is dropped as Esteban Ocon also improves up into 12th. Daniel Ricciardo then goes quicker than his teammate and puts Yuki Tsunoda down in that bottom 5. It is Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Bottas, and Zhou that need to improve. George Russell comes across the line, 9th fastest for Mercedes. Here's Nico Hulkenberg. It's been a tough start to the weekend, but Hulkenberg up into 7th place. Finding his rhythm when it really counts is the German. Daniel Ricciardo now back down into that bottom 5. Needs to go again with 6.5 minutes left to go. Thank you, Mega Peter, for subscribing to the channel. If you don't mind, what do? I am a teacher. Teacher of maths and physics and that kind of thing. Whatever you like. Sometimes I teach stuff. Lewis Hamilton on the radio. Ooh. Lewis Hamilton arguing that he was out of the way. Trying to get Lewis Hamilton done for impeding there. Interesting to see how the stewards see that. Lewis Hamilton not thinking he was in the way whatsoever. Carlos Sainz, the man under pressure. He's in 15th slot right now. He's just coming back into the Ferrari garage. Ferrari are going to have to put a new set of tyres on that car, I think, which is really, really unfortunate for them. They want to keep hold of those soft compound tyres as much as they possibly can, especially with it looking like it might be a wet race tomorrow. Those soft compound tyres, especially if it starts to dry up towards the end of the Grand Prix, can be really, really effective. But it does also feel like they need to make sure Carlos Sainz qualifies higher up. It's such a difficult track to get those overtaking maneuvers done unless you have a real pace advantage on the cars in front. So Carlos Sainz can't be starting down in the bottom 5. Like, if Carlos Sainz starts tomorrow 17th place, it's effectively a write-off, which would be a real shame considering, as I said before, he's only got 10 races left with the Ferrari team, a team that he's won races for. He's shown his quality. You know, he's shown himself to be one of the best drivers on the grid. I'd like him to go out with a little bit of positivity from his Ferrari seat. Wait, wet race tomorrow? It's only like on the cards. There's been quite a bit of rain over the course of the weekend so far in the Netherlands. I think Max Verstappen was talking about it on sort of Thursday during those times. He expects it, you know. A lot of the teams expect there to be some kind of intermittent weather. It's a bit like Silverstone in that there's always a chance, you know what I mean? Never say no when it comes to rain, whereas Abu Dhabi's or somewhere like that, never going to be a rainy race, is it? But that is the way that it is. Lance Stroll, 6th fastest currently, is the only man out on track. He's going to come across the line, actually improve. He goes 4th fastest in the Aston Martin, ahead of Fernando Alonso right now. Alonso down in 13th. Now, as to be said, Lance Stroll really has clicked into gear recently. We discussed the Aston Martin finishing positions throughout the first half of the season earlier. And you look at the fact that Lance Stroll has really closed the gap to Fernando Alonso. Been very, very impressive. And you know what? I'm not usually the man when you want some positivity around... when you want some positivity around Lance Stroll, to be honest. It's not usually me, but he's done well. Can't argue with when he does do well. He needs to get given that praise. Lance Stroll's doing fairly decently. Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas down there. Again, this is usually a track that Stakes Sauber, or at least I'm kind of thinking back to last year. I remember them doing okay last year here. Ooh. And a little bit of a queue in the pit lane. I was thinking that those two cars had come together, an Alpine and a Red Bull side by side in the pit lane. But actually, no, just a long queue to try and come out in a little bit of clean air. Again, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Valtteri Bottas, and Zhou Guanyu, the drivers that really need to be out on track. And actually, Daniel Ricciardo coming around the first corner. So all 4 of those drivers are ready to go. Hey James, what are your thoughts on some people saying that Racing Bulls are favouring Daniel Ricciardo to make him look good? I just don't think that would happen, unfortunately. I can understand like people behind the scenes kind of thinking about it, what maybe what. But at the end of the day, I don't think he has. I think he has just improved throughout the season. I think Yuki Tsunoda's form tailed off a little bit compared to right at the beginning of the season. But also that's because the cars have changed slightly. Haas look a little bit different to the beginning of the season. We've seen a massive increase from the likes of McLaren and Mercedes. The Aston Martin sort of opened the door for a little while, but then have closed it again. So it does just feel like the Red Bulls, or sorry, the RBs, have kind of been in that mix, but because they've kind of stood still, the other teams have kind of jumped around in front and behind them. You know, where Yuki Tsunoda was getting some quite high finishes towards the beginning of the season, they're just not available anymore because Mercedes aren't throwing away those points, you know. Aston Martin aren't throwing away those points anymore. So it's just a more difficult time for them. A minute and 14 seconds to go then. Verstappen on the radio. Unbelievable sliding. Not happy at all. Max Verstappen in the car. Although when easy. Zhou Guanyu crosses the line. Doesn't improve. Valtteri Bottas, though, does. And that puts Carlos Sainz under pressure. Carlos Sainz has just come across the start-finish line. So keep an eye on that Ferrari. Needs to improve, does Carlos Sainz. Going through that first sector, we'll keep an onboard with him. Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda just coming through the middle sector. Can see Tsunoda coming around behind Sergio Perez and having to get past that Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo also behind his teammates. We'll see what the RBs can do there. Zhou Guanyu trying to improve once again, maybe? Or is it all over for Zhou? Might be done and dusted for the Chinese driver. Here is Yuki Tsunoda across the line. 7th fastest for Tsunoda. A much improved lap from the Japanese driver. That puts Valtteri Bottas back down into the bottom 5. Here comes Daniel Ricciardo, 13th fastest. That's quicker than Sergio Perez right now, who's in 14th. That puts Esteban Ocon down into that bottom 5. Carlos Sainz, though, decent through the first and second sector, improving from the Spaniard. He's coming around the final corner and needs to improve dramatically and will look to do so. There is Carlos Sainz. Well, that's the best improvement you can do. Puts himself top of the timing sheet. It was a final sector to really take a bow. Hamilton goes second fastest overall then. That's put Sergio Perez down in the bottom 5. Although Sergio Perez has just gone quickest of anybody through the first sector. Charles Leclerc comes across the line second. Ferrari have turned it up. Obviously, fresh tyres onto the Ferrari and fresh set of tyres onto George Russell's car. He then puts himself top of the timing sheets. A 1:11 dead. Not quite into the 1:10s just yet. Bottas and Zhou are out then. So is Esteban Ocon. Here's Sergio Perez. And Perez then takes the quickest spot at the top of the timing sheet and puts Daniel Ricciardo, his possible replacement, still being touted, out of qualifying. Nico Hulkenberg can take a sigh of relief in 15th place. So it is Ricciardo, Ocon, Bottas, and Zhou Guanyu that drop out of qualifying, joined by Logan Sargent, who didn't get to take part after that huge crash during the the free practice session earlier on this morning. There's a few drivers there that left it a little bit late, didn't they? A few drivers that needed a fresh set of tyres. Perez went on a fresh set. Russell, Sainz, Leclerc all went on fresh sets of tyres right at the end there. I mean, so did Tsunoda and Magnussen, but that's more to be expected from them. Interesting. Nobody into the 110s. Sergio Perez, 6,000ths off of it, though. Doesn't really give us too much of an inkling as to who's going to take pole position, to be honest. I think Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton will still be in the mix. They didn't decide to throw on a fresh set of tyres towards the end. You know, the track is evolving. It is getting quicker and quicker as we continue. So I don't know if, again, you can sort of take this Sergio Perez victory, or first place for now, as gospel, as where he will end up being at the end of the session. But then also, it is a positive. You know, you got to take those positives when you've got them. Be interesting to see where Russell and Hamilton line up to one another. In fact, I'd love to get your thoughts, your guys' thoughts on Russell and Hamilton. I'll share like their first half of the season. Obviously, Mercedes is a bit of an interesting position anyway, because completely different scenario beyond this line. You know, Monaco and Canada, it was very different. Okay, they were still doing pretty well, but you can see they were point scoring places, never a podium in those first 7 races or 8 races of the season for Mercedes. Then just an explosion of ridiculousness. Okay, Great Britain and the 8th place in Hungary and the disqualification for George Russell. Not what you want to see if you're a Mercedes fan, don't get me wrong. But the fact that they then just exploded into this second half of the season and got all of these, you know, podium, every single race, even when they weren't finishing on the podium, they were finishing 4th place. Just an absolutely ridiculous second half or second quarter of the season, second half of the first half of the season for Mercedes. I'm really interested to see where those two line up to each other. I think this last 10 races, I know it got very tense between Hamilton and Russell last year. You know, you can look at Qatar if you just want some evidence of that. But I think even this year, it's going to be that times like 5. It's going to be even bigger because Hamilton is going to want to leave Mercedes as like Mr. Mercedes. You know, I was there every single season. I did this, did that, won races, etc., etc. But then George Russell is going to want to, you know, send Lewis Hamilton out with a little bit of a whimper. He wants to send Lewis Hamilton out and be like, actually, you know what, Lewis? We didn't need you anymore. I've replaced you in this, that, and the other. So I think it's going to get really tense between the two Mercedes drivers. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. So we'll keep an eye on that one too. Ooh. Sergio Perez, not very happy at all. Talking about the fact that he's wasted a set of tyres there. And, you know, you could argue he's right. They probably should have got the job done a little bit earlier on, but still got to take those positives. Got through. Oh, let's have a little look at this Sergio Perez incident then. Ooh. Sergio Perez really does feel like Lewis Hamilton got in the way of him, doesn't he? A little bit of a hand gesture to Lewis Hamilton as he was coming into the weighbridge. Let's have a little look at this from the onboards then. So will Lewis Hamilton end up getting a penalty from this? I have to kind of wait and see. The incremental upgrades have worked out for Mercedes really well. I have to agree. Like, it's been so impressive to see, and especially because they're going for that kind of approach, which is not the approach of a lot of the other teams. So, you know, you see a lot of other teams, big upgrade package, sort it out. McLaren have done that. Ferrari have done that. Williams have done that this weekend. Big upgrade package, then see what we can do from that upgrade package. Whereas Mercedes, I can't think of like a huge upgrade that they've brought. They've just brought lots of little upgrades to almost every single Grand Prix. And I've been really impressed with that kind of philosophy. And it'd be interesting to see if that's the change. You know, if Mercedes have kind of clicked into something there and they can make that work, not just this season, but throughout. Because that is a fundamental difference to how upgrades have worked in Formula One. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of this season and next season, and whether or not they'll continue that kind of cycle into next year as well. How is it that McLaren and Mercedes bring upgrades? They look good. Aston Martin, they go downhill. It's just that correlation between, and I think Aston Martin can kind of be given a little bit of leeway here. I know that they are still that Force India Racing Point team, but there's a lot of new people that have gone into Aston Martin and a lot of changes behind the scenes. And it does make you wonder if they just haven't quite been able to correlate track performance and wind tunnel performance. It feels like they find something in the wind tunnel and it looks amazing. They're like, yes, in the wind tunnel, this is phenomenal. Then when they get it out on track, it's not quite as good as they wanted it to be. And it just feels like that happens quite a lot with Aston Martin. They just can't quite click as to what happens, in testing, on the simulator versus on track. And I just don't think they've quite got that lined up. Whereas McLaren, that's been one thing that they've really worked on. The fact they've got a brand new simulator at the McLaren team and these upgrades have kind of come from that is a massive positive for them, because it means that they've got that simulator, the brand new simulator that they've invested heavily into, and they've got that into a place where it does line up with the track and actually what happens in real life. Just such a difficult comparison and such a difficult thing to get lined up. But as you can see from McLaren, when you do get it lined up, it is a huge, huge positive. And it does mean when you test upgrades in the fictional world, it then translates to the real world. And I just don't think Aston Martin are quite there with that yet. I think there's a little bit left to do in terms of aligning the car in the real world and the simulator world, if that makes sense. That would be my thoughts and feelings on where Aston Martin are not quite going wrong. Do you think the crash from Sargent will affect the development progress of Williams? Yes. Like, it affected. So the crash that they had in Australia and Japan affected their first half of the season massively, because instead of working on the upgrades, they had to rebuild the car over and over again. And again, it's going to be the same thing. They're not going to be able to work on the next kind of iterations of things until they get Logan Sargent's car back to the factory, fix it up fully, make sure that it still hits all the regulation and checks, then get it back out again. So it's just so tricky to get there. MasterCard going to sponsor McLaren, or is that just a rumor? I haven't even heard that rumor, I'll be honest with you. Shall we look at some qualifying lap times then? Carlos Sainz comes across the line, gets us started with a 1:11.8. So about half a second down from his best Q1 time. Some time to find for Carlos Sainz, although there was a used set of tyres on the Ferrari. Same with Charles Leclerc, a used set of soft compound tyres and a 1:11.6 for the Monegasque. Carlos Sainz on board. Oh, he looks, yeah, he's a bit frustrated with himself. Just lost a little bit of grip. Same thing as we saw from Lando Norris during Q1. Loses the rear end of the car a little bit. Does a little bit of a drift. Maybe the wind, possibly. Just coming through there. It's all over the curbs as well as Carlos Sainz. Yeah, just one corner. And it cost him a couple attempts there, Carlos Sainz. Otherwise would have been on pretty much level terms with his teammate. Sergio Perez about to prove everyone wrong. He's not out on track yet, is he? Max Verstappen coming out of the pit lane. Maybe. We'll see. Max Verstappen on the radio. Still rain in the air. And that's correct. So Max Verstappen, a little bit worried that the rain may be coming. Looking at the weather radar. A little bit of a blue spot. Whether or not it will make its way over the track, we'll have to wait and see. On board with Oscar Piastri. Of course, won his first Grand Prix just before the summer break in Hungary. Piastri starts his flying lap here in Zandvoort. Trying to see. It's Alex Albon's going to be next across the line. Kevin Magnussen there as well. Remember, we're just looking for that bottom 5 once again. Alex Albon across the line. Don't know what lap time he put in there. Oh no, it wasn't a fast lap for Alex Albon. Apologies. Thought he was on a fast lap there. Yeah, we're just looking for that bottom 5 once again. So Daniel Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas, and Zhou Guanyu were the drivers to drop out of Q1. Logan Sargent didn't take part after that shunt in free practice 3. Now looking for 5 drivers once again before our top 10 shootout in Q3. Oscar Piastri going very quick indeed through the first and second sector. Obviously, purple sectors not meaning too much as of yet, especially as Max Verstappen has just gone through the first sector and gone quickest of anybody. But Piastri into the 110s then, a 110.5 from the Australian. Sets the standard incredibly high. Nico Hülkenberg, a 111.6 in the Haas, puts himself above the 2 Ferraris. Lando Norris has just nabbed the quickest first sector time from Max Verstappen, and Verstappen 2 tenths off Piastri as he completes the middle sector as well. Here we go then, Verstappen around the final couple of corners. Down towards that very orange crowd to the left-hand side of him. And it's good enough for second fastest at the moment. 3 tenths off Oscar Piastri. Here comes Lando Norris, though, and he goes quickest by 9 thousandths of a second. So it is the 2 McLarens at the top of the timing sheets. He then moves out of the way of Carlos Sainz, starting a fast lap. Lance Stroll also looking pretty swift here today in the Aston Martin. A 111 dead from the Canadian driver. Magnussen and Hülkenberg just behind. And then Pierre Gasly comes across the line to slot himself between the 2 Hasses in 6th place. Sergio Perez, a 5th fastest for the Mexican so far in this qualifying session. That puts Alex Albon down into that bottom 5, having set a lap time. Fernando Alonso is going to be next. And Alonso goes 6th fastest. That put Carlos Sainz into that bottom 5 for him. Russell, Hamilton, Tsunoda still to come. Here comes George Russell in the Mercedes car. Just a little bit off the pace through that middle sector, around the final couple of corners. And going to put himself 3rd fastest in comparison to the McLaren cars. Just 0.05 of a second off of it. Lewis Hamilton then goes 5th fastest in his Mercedes car. Carlos Sainz looking to improve, goes 9th fastest. Puts Pierre Gasly down into that bottom 5. So it is Gasly, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Leclerc, and Albon that need to improve. Here comes Charles Leclerc on a fresh set of tyres in the Ferrari, it has to be said. Can Charles Leclerc get himself out of that bottom 5? Yes. Puts himself 6th fastest. Puts his teammate Carlos Sainz again under pressure on the bubble in 10th spot. Magnussen, Gasly, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, and Albon would be the 5 drivers to drop out if it finishes like this. Lando Norris quickest with 6 minutes left to go in this session. Piastri 2nd behind him. George Russell would start on the podium places. Of course, this is just getting us ready for Q3, though. 5 drivers need to lose their ability to battle for pole position and slot themselves in 11th to 15th place for tomorrow's Grand Prix, just outside of the point scoring places, of course. Come on, Max, do this. Not looking too bad as Max Verstappen. 3 tenths off the pace. Was a fresh set of soft compound tyres for Max Verstappen. He did say on the radio, though, he's not feeling 100% confident in the car right now. A few tweaks to be made, I'm sure, by the team. Seeing Lando Norris, a little bit of refueling there for the McLaren car. Will definitely go out once again, even though he is on a provisional pole slot. Thank you for subscribing. CZ Money. CZ Alonso Money. Alonso Money. 7. Norris pole. On it for it right now. Hulk needs to get into Q1. I mean, he's got through Q1. I think Q2? You mean Q3? If Max doesn't win in Zandvoort, then I'm never watching F1 ever again. Oof. I mean, unfortunately for Max, it's just not as easy as it was to win last year, or even at the beginning of the season, you know? He won 7 of the first 14 races. Probably should have won in Belgium. I'm going to kind of give Belgium to him as a win. And then Austria should have finished in 2nd rather than 1st, because he was just... sorry, 2nd rather than 5th. He was just very silly and got himself into a tangle that he didn't need to. So it does feel like Max Verstappen did throw away a few really solid opportunities in that kind of final 4 races, but threw away Austria and then had to take a grid penalty in Belgium, which didn't really affect him too much overall, but would have probably won that Belgian Grand Prix had it not, 1, been wet, and 2, had to take that penalty. So I think it's all okay for Max Verstappen right now. But I just don't think it's that guaranteed easy wins that he was coming into in 2023, for instance, or at the beginning of the season in the first sort of 5-6 Grand Prix. What's my opinion on Lewis and Ferrari? I think it's great. I think it's really good for not only Ferrari, obviously. I think having Lewis Hamilton there will be a really big challenge for them. I think it makes Ferrari a more competitive team just because I think everyone will step up their game a little bit. And I don't think that's a negative on Carlos Sainz. I do think that Ferrari have improved whilst Carlos Sainz has been there. But I just think the team and, like working in the factory and everybody behind the scenes, having Lewis Hamilton there, it's just like a different pressure. It's a different thought, isn't it? It's a different way of working, and you'll kind of gives you that boost, a little bit of momentum maybe for the team that like, wow, we've got this 7-time world champion coming to us. We want to deliver him a car that can do something a little bit special. So I do think it would be very, very fun to see how Lewis Hamilton gets on. I think it'd be very interesting to see how Charles Leclerc gets on. Charles Leclerc kind of displaced Sebastian Vettel, but Vettel was in a very weird place in his position at Ferrari when that was done. So you could say, well, he's beaten a multiple world champion already. And yeah, but I do think this is the first time that Sebastian Vettel's got a multiple time world champion teammate that is in, the up, you know what I mean? And is trying to get back to winning championships and isn't having that fallout with the Ferrari team that Sebastian Vettel had. And then you look at the battle between Leclerc and Sainz, it's been pretty close throughout those seasons. So I do think that Charles Leclerc is also going to have to step up his game with Lewis Hamilton coming, which will make it very interesting to watch. And very interesting if you're a Charles Leclerc fan to see if he can step up to the plate in that way. Here we go then. 2 minutes left to go in Q2. Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, Nico Hülkenberg, and Alex Albon, the 5 drivers that would currently lose out on their position in Q3 and be locked in for the race tomorrow. They all need to improve, both Hasses in there. See, the ones to keep an eye on. They have been kind of the car that's knocked on the door of Q3 quite often in the first half of the season. Particularly Nico Hülkenberg's been in there quite a few times. Yuki Tsunoda also been in Q3 a few times over the course of the season. They've been the 2 drivers that have really stood out in the midfield battle. Let's see what Pierre Gasly is up to in the Alpine. Personal best first sector. Oh, Nico Hülkenberg comes across the line, not quite good enough. 11th fastest for him. Just missed out on the top 10. Yeah, Gasly's going faster, but needs to make up nearly 0.3 of a second to get in front of Carlos Sainz. So needs to improve considerably, and does. Pierre Gasly up into 5th place for Alpine. 0.3 off Lando Norris, let alone being quicker than Carlos Sainz. That put Carlos Sainz down into that bottom 5 once again. Yuki Tsunoda also improves and goes 6th fastest in the V-Carb. That puts Fernando Alonso under pressure. Both of the Spaniards now into the bottom 5. Sergio Perez improves and goes 4th fastest overall. Just 0.2 off Lando Norris's time at the top of the timing sheets. Lance Stroll has just gone quickest of anybody through the first sector, and he does need to improve because he's now down into the bottom 5 with Alex Albon putting himself 5th fastest and ahead of Max Verstappen. Verstappen, who is in the pits, by the way. Norris, Piastri, Russell, and Verstappen all deciding to stay in. Fernando Alonso takes the checkered flag, goes 8th fastest, but Charles Leclerc down in the bottom 5 as well. Carlos Sainz comes across the line and does go quicker. It's only 9th from Carlos Sainz. That is going to be very, very under pressure, especially as Lance Stroll comes across the line, 4th fastest overall. Carlos Sainz is going to be out of this, right? Because Lewis Hamilton doesn't improve. Hamilton, a poor middle sector, and Hamilton is going to be out of qualifying. It's Charles Leclerc then to knock out his teammate, and Charles Leclerc goes 6th fastest, putting Carlos Sainz down into that bottom 5. Wow. Hamilton and Sainz both out of qualifying. Hamilton, of course, the man replacing Carlos Sainz at Ferrari. Both of them go out together. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, Yuki Tsunoda join them, but was not expecting Lewis Hamilton to be down in 12th place. Carlos Sainz has been really struggling throughout qualifying, hasn't he? Just hasn't been able to click with this Ferrari car this weekend, and is outdone by his fellow Spaniard Fernando Alonso. Squeaks through into the top 10, but some stunning drives in there. Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly both up into the top 10 for a Williams and an Alpine. Very, very impressive as well. And Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin, 4th fastest overall, quickest of anybody through the first sector. Take a bow, Lance Stroll. In fact, let me look at those sector timings. Lance Stroll, he was 2/10 quicker than Lando Norris. He was absolutely astonishingly quick, was Lance Stroll through that first sector. Shame they didn't continue. 4th fastest through the middle sector. Where was he in the finals? It's the final sector. Just let him down a touch. Did Lance Stroll there. Wow. But what a ridiculous first sector from Lance Stroll. Maybe just overcooked his tyres or something through that first sector, because that is absolutely obscene from the Canadian. Maybe Lance Stroll could be starting within touching distance of the podium places here in Zandvoort. That would be very, very impressive indeed. But it is Logan Sargent, the man who didn't manage to take part in qualifying, right down at the bottom in 20th place. They're still trying to put that Williams car back together again. Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas, the 2 stakes hours, in 19th and 18th place. Esteban Ocon will start ahead of them in 17th, with Daniel Ricciardo being the final driver to miss out on Q2. He'll start in 16th place. It'll then be the 2 Hasses ahead of him, Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg, in 15th and 14th place respectively. Yuki Tsunoda was only good enough for 13th. Lewis Hamilton will start in 12th place, with Carlos Sainz in 11th. Those guys are now out of qualifying. And we have our top 10 shootout. Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Max Verstappen, Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, George Russell, Oscar Piastri, and Lando Norris. The 10 drivers in the battle for 10th place. Hey, not applicable. Answer this. Then followed by no question. Interesting. Williams looking good. I wish Sargent gets his first point. Starting from 20th place. Maybe. Adrian Newey to Aston Martin and Lance Stroll Championship 2026. We will be there. I mean, yeah, it's looking more and more likely, isn't it? Adrian Newey to Aston Martin. It's been talked about a few times now. And it's definitely starting to shift towards the more likely to happen. Lots and lots of people starting to make that connection. And it looks like Ferrari and Mercedes were also in talks with Adrian Newey in one way or another, but they seem to have petered out. It is the Aston Martin connection is the one that kind of continues to be talked about, doesn't it? Over and over again. Hope Logan goes to IndyCar. Yeah, definitely. I feel like IndyCar would be great for him. That American audience as well. Him getting in there. When and where did Max Verstappen win his first race? Spain 2016. Was it 16? Yeah, he made his debut in 2016. Yeah. I mean, that's quite an easy one, isn't it? Generally speaking. Why did I change my name? Just because lots of content creators have been told off by Formula One fairly recently. Formula One kind of came in with a bit of a ban hammer over the course of the summer break. I mean, FP1 will, if you know him, kind of got hit the hardest of anybody that I know anyway. But yeah, Formula One trying to sort of send people under a little bit and get people to remove F1 from their usernames and various bits and pieces so that they're not directly connected with Formula One. So like you can still talk about Formula One, to still make Formula One content, but you can't make out like you are officially connected to Formula One. And apparently by having F1 in your username, that means you are officially connected to F1, at least in their terms. So a lot of people have had to take F1 out of their username. I will admit I didn't receive one of the letters, but I've seen one of the letters that was sent out to another content creator about removing F1 from their username. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to get ahead of it. And like, before I end up with one of those letters, because I will at some point, I'm sure. So I had to do it. Thought about changing the name completely because not applicable has nothing to do with racing or Formula One at all, to be honest with you. And it came from nowhere. So not applicable was just what the channel was called when I just made like the YouTube account ages ago. I put it as not applicable because like first name, last name, and then not applicable was going to be the name of a podcast that I did, and then that never really came to any sense. So yeah, not applicable. Just kind of it doesn't really mean anything. So I did think about like 100,000 subscribers, maybe changing the name of the channel to something. But I feel like I don't know. I also don't know what I'd change it to. So it's out there. Yeah, I'll throw it out to the crowd. You guys can think of any particular like really cool Formula One related names, but without F1 in it, or any F1 related things in it, like a racing name. Did think like JB Racing or something like that, but or NA Racing. But again, just kind of left it as not applicable. Got rid of the Formula One. Pathetic considering the amount of money that they make anyway. Yeah, of course. And I always think, you know, a lot of content creators are quite positive about Formula One generally. I know that you've got a lot of Formula One content creators that will bash the sport for various bits and pieces. I like to think that I'm quite positive, generally speaking. Like I just love Formula One and I love talking about it and I love sharing this community with you guys in one way or another. Not applicable P1. I think Matt and Tommy would be a little bit upset with that. Considering NA Racing. Yeah, I was thinking NA Racing. It might end up being NA Racing at some point. Imagine free practice 1 Will. It would be good if I was like free practice 1 James. Could definitely do that. Don't change it. It's my brand. Very true. That's what I mean. I was like, I'll just take the F1 off and see what it is. Not applicable is the brand name for you now. Don't change. Very true. Very true. I mean, it will probably end up. There'll be an N and an A in there at some point. You know what I mean? Why isn't Max so dominant like 2023? Just because everybody else has kind of closed up, to be honest. Red Bull, I feel like have kind of tapered or hit a little bit of a plateau in terms of what they can really bring in terms of extra speed. Like, there is a maximum that you can get out of a regulation set. You know what I mean? It's a bit like well, any sport, to be honest. There's a maximum to what you can get. You know, they're never going to do a lap of Zandvoort in less than a minute. That would just be obscene, right? there's a maximum amount of time that does have to take. So I feel like Red Bull are just kind of getting towards that threshold. And then as they've got towards that threshold of the maximum they can get out of how they've set up their car, the likes of McLaren and Mercedes have come in with slightly different ideas and have been able to actually get closer or even possibly, you could argue, overtake that threshold that Red Bull have kind of hit with the way that they have developed in this regulation cycle. Which then, of course, makes 2025 incredibly, incredibly cool because it's that final iteration. We're not really going to see many teams, I don't think, spend a lot of time on their 2025 cars during 2025. So it's almost going to be like a beginning of 2025. These are the cars we've got for the 20 or so races that we're going to have. let's see what happens. And I think it's going to be very, very close because a lot of teams are going to be focusing more so on 2026. Not applicable farming one. Nice, yeah. That could have been what the F stands for, to be fair. They never asked me if it stood for formula. Maybe it didn't. Let's get into it then. 9 minutes ago in this qualifying session. Lovely to have a little chat. But let's focus in as Oscar Piastri is going to get us going with a quick lap time. Where is Oscar Piastri going to land? A 110.1 from Piastri. Very nice indeed. Here comes Max Verstappen. 110.2. 0.02 of a second off. Lando Norris comes across the line. Quicker than his teammate. A 110 dead from Lando Norris. Gets himself a 1/10 of a second over Oscar Piastri. Yes, indeed. Love that. Charles Leclerc, 110.7 from the Ferrari. George Russell, I think, is next across the line. Oh, no, sorry. Pierre Gasly is there as well. Pierre Gasly now coming across the start-finish line. Goes 5th fastest in the Alpine. It's a heavy amount of time that Max Verstappen's going to have to find, isn't it? 1.5 tenths. Lando Norris with an absolutely sublime time at this point. George Russell across the line in the Mercedes then, 4th fastest and 4.5 tenths off the pace of Lando Norris. The Mercedes just not looking at the level that it was in terms of getting that pole position before the summer break. Does feel like George Russell hasn't quite got there. And of course, Lewis Hamilton not taking part now. Lewis Hamilton down in 12th place and out before he got into Q3. Lance Stroll, Sergio Perez, Alex Albon and Fernando Alonso. Still no time set for those 4 drivers. Gap between McLaren and Alpine is insane. I mean, yeah, I think Pierre Gasly, I don't know. Pierre Gasly's time in Q2 was better than that. And he was on a used set of tyres. Charles Leclerc also on a used set of tyres, has to be said. So, can't quite be directly compared, unfortunately. But like George Russell, for instance, being 4.5 tenths off on a fresh set of tyres, not where you want it to be. Is the live stream a bit slower? Shouldn't be. I'll have a look at it afterwards. It should be as close to live as possible. I mean, I'm watching the live stream and I can see the live timings. But maybe YouTube have delayed it a little bit, one way or another. Ooh. Lando wants to prove his doubters wrong in the second half of the season. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about Lando Norris, whether or not he should have done better in the sort of last few races before the summer break. I think you're right. I think Lando Norris will want to do it. Go Piastri. Max Verstappen. Hamilton didn't make it. No, he did not indeed. Was my favorite driver. I'm a McLaren fan through and through. So Lando or Piastri, more than happy with either of those two taking pole position or the win, to be honest with you. I'd say I slightly favour Lando just because he's been there longer. I feel like I've got more of a connection with him, but I do absolutely love Oscar. I feel like Oscar is just like such a character. He's almost like the Kimi Raikkonen of this generation, if you will. I think Kimi, don't think anyone will be Kimi, if you know what I mean. But he's got that kind of cool, calm, collected nature about him. Albon passed Sainz in a Williams. Nice. Very true. Alex Albon out qualifying his future teammate already. Will he be able to out qualify him later on? See. everyone is a McLaren fan. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like McLaren have done pretty well at like hoovering up the new generation of Formula One fans, to be fair. Like everyone who's kind of got into Formula One recently does feel like they've become a McLaren fan. Don't know how they've done that as such. I feel like they have done well in terms of like making that connection. Obviously, Lando Norris also has like the quadrant stuff and things like that. So it makes me wonder if a lot of people have kind of connected with Lando more so. And then outside of that, I think Yuki Tsunoda is like the most loved driver by like fans. I think it was like under 12 or under 13 or something like that. There was a thing recently where like Yuki Tsunoda was the most loved driver by the like youngest generation of Formula One fans. But yeah, it does feel like that kind of teen, early 20s fan base that's kind of just come into Formula One is very much leaning towards McLaren. But you know, I'll take it as a McLaren fan myself. I don't mind more people being McLaren fans. Here we go then. Fernando Alonso comes across the line, goes 5th fastest in the Aston Martin. Lance Stroll was 7th fastest in his Aston Martin. Sergio Perez and Alex Albon still yet to put in a lap time. Thank you, Mr. Andreas GR, for subscribing to the channel. Previous pole positions, Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen. Are we going to finally see someone in this new generation beat Max Verstappen to pole position? Because before that, it was 1985 and Piquet. So Max Verstappen dominating the pole position standings in the last 3 Dutch Grand Prix weekends. 10th and a half still to find from him, though. Fernando Alonso saying that is the absolute maximum that he's got out of the car, thinking that he's done as good a job as possible. Antonio David, absolute OG of the channel. Thank you very much, mate. Been a McLaren fan since Senna. 25 months as a member. Goodness gracious. I mean, if that doesn't give you if that doesn't convince you to become a member as well, the word escaped me, I don't know what more does. Antonio, been here for 25 months, continuing to be a member. Max Verstappen, though, final opportunity for the Red Bull driver, and he's a 10th and a half off through the first sector. Not good enough to put himself top of the timing sheets right now. Ooh. Lando Norris is also improving. A purple first sector through that. Lando Norris improving and going very, very quick indeed. I mean, right now it's looking like Lando Norris has got that in the bag, although that is a stunning middle sector from Max Verstappen. Verstappen 2 temps up. Lando Norris, though, improving through the middle sector as well. It's going to be pretty tight. Both drivers, Verstappen and Norris, improving their lap times considerably. There goes Verstappen, a 1:10 dead. Provisional pole for Verstappen. Here comes Norris, and he snatches it back off him by 3.5 tenths. What a ridiculous lap time from Lando Norris. That is a 1:9.6. Sergio Perez goes into 4th spot in the Red Bull. Here comes Oscar Piastri. Piastri's improved through the first sector, but it's not purple from the Australian. George Russell improves through the first sector, but still 2 temps off. Alex Albon goes 7th fastest overall. It's a poor middle sector from Oscar Piastri. He's 3.5 temps off and is not going to be able to get himself up into pole position. Might be able to just sneak in front of Max Verstappen, though, in the McLaren with a really, really solid final sector. Here comes Piastri then, round the final corner. Can he sneak into second? No, not quite. Stays 3rd fastest. 5 tenths of a second off of his teammate. George Russell is going to be coming around the final corner too. Gasly just behind him, although I don't know if Gasly's on a fast lap. Here comes George Russell. Goes quicker than Perez. Goes up into 4th place. Decent qualifying from George Russell there to get himself in front of a Red Bull at least. But Lando Norris, take a bow. Woo! 3.5 tenths, nearly 4 tenths of a second quicker than Max Verstappen. And if that doesn't shut up some of the Lando Norris haters, I don't know what will. Absolutely ridiculous from Lando Norris. Goodness gracious me. There we have it then. Our lineup for the Grand Prix tomorrow. Lando Norris will start on pole position with Max Verstappen beside him. We've seen that in Spain. It didn't end well for Lando Norris. Can he hold on to first place going into the first quarter tomorrow? We'll have to wait and see. Oscar Piastri will start in 3rd place behind his teammate George Russell in 4th. Sergio Perez will start in 5th place. Charles Leclerc in 6th. Fernando Alonso 7th with Alex Albon in 8th place. Lance Stroll in 9th and Pierre Gasly in 10th place, rounding off the points scoring places. Then behind that, Carlos Sainz, the man who just missed out on Q3, dropped out in Q2. He'll start in 11th place with his sort of future Ferrari replacement, Lewis Hamilton, in 12th place beside him. Yuki Tsunoda will start 13th with Nico Hülkenberg 14th and Kevin Magnussen in 15th place. Then, of course, the drivers that dropped out in Q1. Daniel Ricciardo will start in 16th place. Esteban Ocon 17th. Valtteri Bottas in 18th place. Zhou Guanyu in 19th place. And Logan Sargent didn't manage to take part in qualifying. Will have to start from the back of the pack. We are live once again for the race tomorrow as well. And not applicable, do I live stream every qualifying? I'm live for every qualifying, sprint race, and Grand Prix. Again, like in the future, if this ever became full-time, I'd like to do the free practices as well, but we'd have to wait and see. I would be live every single session if possible, but we'll leave that in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you do want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button as well. And if you haven't watched the video that I released yesterday, it's linked down in the description. Even if you've seen it before, just hit that link in the description. Watch yesterday's video. Massively helps out the channel. Leave a like, of course, etc, etc. I will see you tomorrow for the Grand Prix itself, where we'll see Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen down into turn 1 once again. Formula 1 is back, and it is back with a bang.